Some people say you can hear fate coming before it arrives. And on that December night, fate sounded like thunder rolling across frozen peaks. Elena Hartwell had learned to read the mountain's moods the way most people read faces. Living alone on the western ridge for 3 winters had taught her that survival wasn't about strength. It was about listening. And tonight the mountain was screaming warnings she couldn't ignore. The wind hit first, not gradually, but all at once, like the sky had torn open. Elena stood at her cabin window, watching the pines bend nearly horizontal, their branches clawing at the darkening air. Snow came next, not falling, but flying sideways, erasing the world in sheets of white. She'd seen storms before, but this one felt different. This one felt personal. She checked her supplies by lamplight. Firewood stacked against the inner wall. Enough for 5 days if she was careful. Dried beans and salted meat hanging from the ceiling beams. Water barrel 3/4 full. The livestock were secured in the small barn she'd built with her own hands after her father passed. Everything was ready. Everything had to be ready when you lived this far from town, this far from help. But Elena hadn't prepared for what came next. The knocking started just after midnight. Faint at first, almost swallowed by the howling wind. She thought she'd imagined it. Then it came again, desperate, irregular, the sound of someone fighting just to stay conscious. When she opened that door, 2 figures practically fell across her threshold. A man, tall and broad-shouldered despite his obvious exhaustion, ice crystals frozen into his dark beard. And clutched against his chest, a boy maybe 7 years old wrapped in blankets that had done nothing against the mountain's fury. The man's eyes met hers, gray as storm clouds, filled with something that looked like both gratitude and shame. He tried to speak, but his lips were blue, his words lost in shivers that racked his entire frame. Elena didn't ask questions. Questions could wait. Survival couldn't. She dragged them both inside, slammed the door against the storm's rage, and went to work. Years of living alone had made her efficient. She knew exactly what needed to happen and in what order. Get them dry. Get them warm. Get liquid into them before their bodies shut down completely. The man she helped first, stripping off his frozen coat with hands that had learned not to hesitate. His clothes beneath were expensive. She noticed that even in her urgency, wool and cotton that spoke of money, of a life very different from hers. But expensive clothes meant nothing to hypothermia. She wrapped him in her spare blankets, the ones she'd been saving, and sat him by the fire she'd built up into a roaring blaze. Then the boy, he was worse off. His small face pale as the snow outside, his breathing too shallow. Elena's heart clenched as she peeled away his wet layers, revealing a child so thin she could count his ribs. She worked faster, wrapping him in her own quilt, the one her mother had stitched, and held a tin cup of warm broth to his lips until he managed a few swallows. The man watched her through all of this, his eyes tracking her movements with an intensity that made her uncomfortable, not threatening, something else. Something like wonder. My name. He finally managed, his voice raw. Is James. James Morrison. This is my son, Daniel. Elena nodded, stoking the fire. Elena Hartwell. This is my home. We were traveling to Carson City, James continued, each word seeming to cost him. The storm came out of nowhere. Our horse broke its leg in a ravine. We've been walking for, I don't know how long. Your light. We saw your light from the ridge. She handed him more broth. You're lucky. Most people don't find this place unless they're looking for it. Lucky, James repeated, the word hanging between them like a question. That first night, Elena barely slept. She kept the fire burning, checking on Daniel every hour, watching the rise and fall of his small chest. James had finally succumbed to exhaustion, his body surrendering to the warmth and safety it had been denied for so long. But Elena stayed awake, listening to the storm rage against her cabin walls, wondering what twist of fate had brought these strangers to her door, because fate didn't just bring people together without reason. She'd learned that lesson the hard way. By morning, the storm had intensified. Snow piled against the cabin door so high she could barely push it open. The world beyond had vanished completely. No barn, no trees, no sky. Just white. Just the storm claiming everything it touched. They were trapped. All 3 of them. And Elena realized with a strange mixture of anxiety and something else she couldn't quite name, that these strangers would be sharing her solitude for far longer than a single night. James woke slowly, his body stiff, his eyes taking a moment to remember where he was. When he saw Daniel still sleeping peacefully by the fire, something in his face crumpled. Relief so profound it looked almost like pain. "He's strong," Elena said quietly from her place by the stove. "He'll recover." James looked at her then, really looked at her, and Elena found herself standing a little straighter under that gaze. "You saved our lives," he said simply. She shrugged, uncomfortable with gratitude. "I did what anyone would do." "No," James shook his head slowly. "Not anyone. Most people. Most people would have been too afraid, too cautious. You didn't even hesitate." Elena turned back to the stove, her cheeks warming for reasons that had nothing to do with the fire. "Coffee?" she asked, changing the subject. That day set the pattern for the ones that followed. The storm raged on, 2 days, then 3, then 4, showing no signs of weakening. Elena's cabin, meant for one person living a simple life, suddenly held 3. Space became precious. Privacy became memory. But something unexpected began to happen. James, despite his obvious education and refined manner, didn't sit idle. As soon as his strength returned, he started helping. Not just with small tasks, but with real work. He chopped wood with surprising skill, repaired a section of roof that had been leaking, reinforced the barn door that Elena had been meaning to fix for months. His hands, which should have been soft from a life of ease, showed calluses and competence. Daniel, too, began to emerge from his shell. The boy had been silent at first, watching everything with wide, cautious eyes, but Elena's gentle nature drew him out. She showed him how to feed the chickens, how to recognize when the fire needed more wood, how to read the weather in the way smoke curled from the chimney. He followed her like a shadow, soaking up her attention with the hunger of a child who hadn't received enough. And Elena found herself smiling more than she had in 3 years, found herself looking forward to mornings instead of dreading another day of isolation, found herself noticing the way James moved, the rare sound of his laugh, the tenderness in his eyes when he watched his son. On the 4th night, with the storm finally beginning to ease, they sat together by the fire, Daniel asleep between them, his small hand clutched in James's larger one. "Thank you," James said quietly, his voice carrying a weight that made Elena look up. "Not just for the shelter, for giving him something I haven't been able to." "What's that?" Elena asked. James was silent for a long moment. "Peace," he finally answered. He hasn't looked this content in years. Elena wanted to ask why, wanted to understand what had driven this obviously wealthy man and his son into the wilderness, into danger, into her solitary life. But the storm was quieting, and she knew morning would bring questions enough. For now, in this moment, with firelight dancing across 3 faces and warmth filling her small cabin, for now, not knowing was enough. The morning after the storm broke dawned so clear it hurt to look at, like the world had been scrubbed clean and polished bright. Elena stood outside her cabin, breathing in air so cold it crystallized in her lungs, and surveyed the damage. Snow had drifted 8 feet high against the northern wall. The path to the barn was completely buried. Several fence posts had snapped under the weight of ice. It would take days, maybe weeks, to dig out. Behind her, she heard the cabin door open. James stepped out, Daniel bundled in his arms, and both of them stopped, staring at the transformed landscape with something like awe. "I've never seen anything like it," James murmured. "Beauty and destruction," Elena said, already reaching for her shovel. "The mountain gives both in equal measure." What followed were days of labor that tested all 3 of them. James threw himself into the work with a determination that surprised Elena. This wasn't a man playing at being useful. This was someone who understood what hard work meant. Together they cleared paths, repaired fences, checked on livestock that had somehow survived. Daniel helped where he could, carrying smaller tools, bringing them water, his small face serious with concentration. But it was in the quiet moments, the pauses between labor, that Elena began to notice the cracks in James's carefully constructed facade. She found the watch by accident. It had fallen from his coat pocket while he was working, half buried in snow near the woodpile. Elena picked it up, meaning to return it immediately, but something made her pause. It was gold, real gold, not plated, heavy in her hand and intricately engraved. She turned it over and saw initials JWM, and beneath them words that made her breath catch. Worthington Mills & Co. Worthington Mills. Everyone in the territory knew that name. The railroad fortune, the banking empire, the family that owned half of California and most of Nevada, the family whose patriarch had just passed away, leaving behind a scandal about inheritance and a son who'd disappeared. Elena stood there in the snow, the watch burning in her palm like a coal, understanding flooding through her with nauseating clarity. James Morrison wasn't fleeing to something. He was fleeing from something. From wealth, from legacy, from a name that carried more weight than any man should have to bear. James Worthington Morrison, not just a traveler, not just a father seeking refuge, but the heir to one of the largest fortunes in the West. And he was standing 50 feet away from her, hammering nails into her barn like a common laborer. She should have confronted him immediately, should have demanded explanations. But Elena had learned long ago that everyone carried secrets. She certainly carried enough of her own. So instead, she slipped the watch back into his coat pocket while he was distracted and said nothing. But knowing changed things. It changed everything. That evening, after Daniel had fallen asleep, Elena watched James more carefully. Watched the way he occasionally caught himself reaching for things that weren't there. Expensive things, she realized. Watched how his speech patterns shifted when he was tired, becoming more refined, more educated. Watched the weight he carried in his shoulders. The burden of being someone he was trying so hard not to be. "You're staring," James said quietly, not looking up from the harness he was repairing. Elena flushed. "Sorry, I was just thinking about..." She chose her words carefully. About how people end up where they do. About the paths that lead someone to a stranger's door in the middle of a storm. James's hand stilled on the leather. "And what conclusions did you reach?" "That everyone's running from something," Elena said softly. "Or towards something. Sometimes both." He looked at her then, and in his eyes she saw recognition. The understanding that she knew more than she was saying. But instead of anger or fear, what she saw was relief. "What are you running from, Elena Hartwell?" he asked. The question caught her off guard. No one had asked her that in 3 years. No one had cared to look past the surface of the solitary woman on the ridge. "Expectations," she answered honestly. "The weight of being someone I didn't want to be. Living a life that felt like wearing someone else's clothes." She paused. "You?" "The same," James said. "Exactly the same." And in that moment, with those words hanging between them like a bridge, something shifted. The connection that had been building since that first desperate night crystallized into understanding. They were mirrors of each other. Different circumstances, different details, but the same essential truth. They were both trying to find out who they could be when the world stopped telling them who they should be. The next days took on a different quality. There was still work, constant, demanding work, but now there were conversations too, real ones. James told her about growing up in San Francisco, about boardrooms and social expectations, about watching his father build an empire while forgetting to build a family. He told her about Daniel's mother, a society woman who died in childbirth, leaving James with a son he barely knew how to father, and a fortune he'd never wanted. Elena, in turn, shared her own story. About a father who'd loved the mountain more than civilization, about learning to survive in a world that told women they needed protection, about choosing isolation over subjugation. "People in town thought I was crazy," she admitted one afternoon while they were mending fence line. "A woman alone on the ridge. They said I'd starve or freeze or be attacked by animals. But you know what I learned?" "What?" "That I was stronger than they ever imagined. Stronger than I ever imagined." James smiled, a real smile, not the careful one he usually wore. "They underestimated you." "Everyone underestimates women," Elena said. "Right up until we prove them wrong." Daniel, watching them work, seemed to bloom under the stability. He talked more now, his voice gaining confidence. He'd started calling Elena Miss Elena with a formality that made her heart ache. She taught him to read, really read, not just the basic primers he'd learned in expensive schools, using her father's old books and the patience that came from genuine affection. One evening, while James was outside checking on the livestock, Daniel curled up beside Elena by the fire. "Miss Elena?" he asked quietly. "Why doesn't Father want to go home?" The question froze her. "What makes you think he doesn't?" "Because he's happy here," Daniel said with the devastating honesty of children. He's never happy at home. He's always sad or angry or empty. But here, he smiles, he laughs. He looks at you the way people look at things they want to keep. Elena felt her cheeks flush. Daniel, I don't want to go back either, the boy continued, his small hand finding hers. Can we stay, please? Before Elena could answer, the cabin door opened and James stepped in, his arms full of firewood. He saw them by the fire, Daniel's pleading face, Elena's conflicted expression, and something passed across his features. Understanding, fear, hope. Time for bed? Daniel, he said gently. The boy obeyed, but not before squeezing Elena's hand one more time. After Daniel was asleep, James and Elena sat in their usual positions by the fire. The silence stretched, comfortable but heavy with unspoken things. He's right, you know, James finally said. About me being happy here, about all of it. Elena's heart was beating too fast. James, I know what you found, he interrupted quietly. The watch. I know you know who I am, she met his eyes. Does it matter? That depends, James said. Does it matter to you? Elena thought about it, really thought about it. About the man she'd come to know over these past weeks. About his calloused hands and genuine laugh. About the way he treated Daniel with growing confidence. About the peace she saw in him when he forgot to maintain his walls. No, she said firmly, it doesn't matter. Money doesn't make a man. Neither does a name. What matters is who you choose to be when no one's watching. James exhaled slowly, like he'd been holding his breath for days. And who do you see? When you look at me? Someone trying, Elena answered honestly. Someone learning. Someone who's a better father now than he was 3 weeks ago. Someone who... She hesitated, then continued. Someone I've come to care about more than I should. The words hung between them. Confession and question and possibility all at once. James leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his eyes never leaving hers. Elena Hartwell, you've given me something I didn't know I was looking for. You've given Daniel something he desperately needed, and I keep thinking, what? That maybe fate didn't bring us here just to survive a storm. Maybe it brought us here to survive ourselves. Elena felt tears prick her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming sensation of being truly seen for the first time in years. But even as warmth flooded through her, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered warnings, because wealth like his didn't just disappear. Legacies like his didn't just let people walk away. And eventually, inevitably, the world James had left behind would come looking for him. The question wasn't if. The question was when, and what would happen to all of them when it did. Spring came late to the ridge that year, like the mountain was reluctant to let winter go. 6 weeks had passed since that desperate knock on Elena's door. 6 weeks of watching James transform from a hollow-eyed fugitive into something resembling a whole person. 6 weeks of Daniel laughing more than crying, learning more than fearing. 6 weeks of Elena discovering that solitude wasn't actually what she'd been seeking all along, just safety from the wrong kind of company. But safety is an illusion we build to keep the world at bay. And the world always finds a way in. The trouble started in town. Elena had gone down the mountain for supplies, a journey she made once a month, trading preserved goods and hand-stitched leather for flour, salt, and ammunition. She'd left James and Daniel at the cabin, both of them content with repair projects and the simple routines they'd established. She should have known something was wrong the moment she rode into Preston's Crossing. The way conversations stopped when she dismounted, the way eyes followed her, curious and speculating in equal measure, the way Marcus Brennan, the general store owner, leaned across his counter with gossip practically vibrating off him. Heard you've got company up on that ridge. Miss Hartwell, he said, making it sound casual while his eyes gleamed with interest. Elena kept her face neutral, counting out coins for flour. News travels fast. Mountain's a small place, Marcus continued. Folks are saying you've got a man and child staying with you. Weeks now, from what I hear. Travelers caught in the storm, Elena said flatly. Christian charity demands hospitality. Oh, no judgment here. Marcus raised his hands, but his smile said otherwise. Just, you know how people talk. A woman alone, a strange man. Tongues wag. Elena felt anger flash hot in her chest. Let them wag. I sleep well at night knowing I saved 2 lives. Can everyone in this town say the same? She gathered her supplies and left before Marcus could respond, but the damage was done. The seed was planted, and in a small town with long winters and short entertainment, seeds like that grew fast. What Elena didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that someone else had been in Preston's Crossing that day. Someone who'd been searching, asking questions, showing a photograph to anyone who'd look. A private detective named Harrison Cole, hired by the Worthington family to find their missing heir, and Marcus Brennan, always eager to be important, had looked at that photograph and smiled. Elena returned to the cabin just before sunset, her mind still churning with irritation over small-town gossip. But when she crested the final ridge and saw her home, all other thoughts vanished. James was outside teaching Daniel how to split wood. The boy was laughing, wielding a hatchet far too big for him while James steadied the logs and offered gentle corrections. The late sun painted them both golden, and something in Elena's chest cracked open, not breaking but blooming. This was what she'd been afraid to want. This sense of family, of belonging, of home being more than just four walls and survival. James looked up as she approached, and his smile, easy now, unguarded, made her breath catch. "How was town?" he called. "Complicated," Elena answered, dismounting. "We need to talk." That evening, after Daniel was asleep, Elena told James everything. About the whispers, the speculation, the way news spread like wildfire even in the mountains. "They know you're here," she said quietly. "They don't know who you are, but they know you exist. And in a place like Preston's Crossing, that's enough to make you interesting." James was quiet for a long time, staring into the fire. "I've been foolish," he finally said. "Thinking we could just disappear. Thinking the world wouldn't notice." "You're not foolish," Elena countered. "You're just hopeful. There's a difference." "Hope is a luxury," James said bitterly. "One I can't afford. Not with Daniel depending on me." "Then what do you want to do?" He looked at her then, and in his eyes she saw a war being fought. Between responsibility and desire, between the life he'd fled and the life he'd found. "I want to stay," he said simply. "I want to build a life here with you, with Daniel. I want to wake up every morning and know that what I'm doing matters because I chose it. Not because a name demanded it. But wanting something doesn't make it possible." "Why not?" Elena challenged. "Who says it's impossible? You're here, you're alive, you're free. Isn't that enough?" "Until they find me," James said. "And they will find me, Elena. My father's estate is worth millions. There are lawyers, board members, investors, all of them with reasons to want me found. Not because they care about me, but because they care about what I represent. Control, continuity, the Worthington name." Elena moved closer, taking his hand in hers. "Then we'll face it when it comes. Together." The word, together, hung between them like a promise neither had dared speak before. "You don't know what you're saying," James whispered. "The scandal of it. A woman like you associated with someone like me. They'll destroy your reputation. They'll make your life hell." "My reputation?" Elena laughed, but there was steel beneath it. "James, I'm a woman living alone on a mountain. Half the town already thinks I'm crazy and the other half thinks I'm cursed. What more can they take from me?" "Everything," James said seriously. "They can take everything. I've seen it happen. Seen my father's enemies use scandal like weapons. Seen good people crushed under the weight of rumor and innuendo." "I'm not afraid," Elena said, and realized she meant it. "I've survived winter storms and summer droughts. I've survived loneliness and loss. I can survive gossip." James pulled her close then, his forehead resting against hers. "You're the strongest person I've ever met," he murmured. "And the bravest. And I don't deserve you." "You don't get to decide what you deserve," Elena said firmly. "Neither of us do. We just get to decide what we'll fight for." But the universe, it seemed, had already decided that their fight would come sooner than later. 3 days later, a rider appeared on the ridge trail. Not a local. Locals knew better than to approach Elena's property without invitation. This was a stranger, well-dressed, riding an expensive horse with the kind of confidence that came from always getting what he wanted. Elena was outside when she spotted him. James had taken Daniel inside for afternoon lessons, so she stood alone, rifle in hand, not threatening, but not welcoming either. The man stopped 20 yards from her property line, making a show of keeping his hands visible. "Miss Hartwell?" he called. "My name is Harrison Cole." I'm a private investigator from San Francisco. I'm looking for someone, and I believe you might be able to help me." Elena's blood ran cold, but her voice stayed steady. "I don't know you, Mr. Cole, and I don't know anything about whatever you're looking for. I suggest you turn around." Harrison smiled, a predator's smile. "I'm looking for James Worthington Morrison, heir to the Worthington Mills fortune, last seen fleeing San Francisco with his son. There's a substantial reward for information leading to his whereabouts." "Never heard of him," Elena said flatly. "Really?" Harrison's smile widened. "Because I have 3 witnesses from Preston's Crossing who say you've been harboring a man and child matching their description for over 6 weeks. And the shopkeeper, Marcus Brennan, he was particularly helpful. Described the man in detail. Mentioned he had expensive clothes, educated speech, and seemed out of place." Elena felt rage and fear warring in her chest. Damn Marcus and his gossiping tongue. "What I do on my property is my business," she said coldly. "Now leave, Miss Hartwell." Harrison's voice took on a tone that was probably meant to be reasonable. "I understand you may feel some misguided loyalty, but James Worthington Morrison has responsibilities, an estate to manage, a position to fill. His family needs him." "His family abandoned him," Elena interrupted, words sharp as knives. "His family made his life hell. His family cared more about money than his happiness. So forgive me if I don't care about what his family needs." Harrison's eyes narrowed. "So you admit he's here?" Elena realized her mistake too late. She'd confirmed what he'd only suspected. Before she could respond, the cabin door opened and James stepped out. He'd heard everything, that much was clear from his face. Daniel clung to his hand, fear written across his small features. "It's all right, Elena," James said quietly. He looked at Harrison. "I'm James Morrison. What do you want?" Harrison's smile turned triumphant. "Mr. Morrison, your family has been desperately worried. They sent me to—" "My family," James interrupted coldly, "hasn't been worried about me for years. They're worried about their fortune, about their control, about keeping the Worthington name pristine. So let's not pretend this is about concern." "Nevertheless," Harrison continued smoothly, "you have legal obligations. Your father's will stipulates that you must return to San Francisco within 6 months of his death to claim your inheritance. That deadline is approaching. If you fail to appear, the estate passes to your uncle. Is that what you want?" James was silent, his jaw tight. Elena could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. Weighing obligations against freedom. Responsibility against happiness. "I'll think about it," James finally said. "You have 2 weeks," Harrison replied. "After that, I'm authorized to take more persuasive measures." He glanced at Daniel, and the implied threat made Elena's finger tighten on her rifle. "Get off my land," she said, voice deadly quiet. "Now," Harrison tipped his hat mockingly. "Of course. I'll be staying in Preston's Crossing. Mr. Morrison, when you're ready to discuss this reasonably, you know where to find me." He rode away, leaving behind a silence that felt like aftermath. James sank onto the cabin steps, his head in his hands. Daniel immediately curled against him, and Elena saw the boy trembling. "I'm sorry," James whispered. "I'm so sorry. I brought this to your door." Elena sat beside him, wrapping her arm around both him and Daniel. "No," she said firmly. "The storm brought you to my door. Everything after that? We chose that. All of us. They'll make your life hell," James said. "Cole is just the beginning. If I don't go back, they'll send lawyers, investigators, maybe even law enforcement. They'll tie you up in lawsuits, ruin your reputation, make it impossible for you to live here in peace. Then fight," Elena said. "Don't run. Don't hide. Fight for what you want. And what if what I want is impossible?" Elena took his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. "You taught Daniel how to split wood today. You repaired 6 sections of fence this week. You've learned to read weather patterns and predict storms. You've built a life here, a real life. That's not impossible. That's real. That's yours. Don't let them take it." In his eyes, she saw hope warring with fear, saw the man he'd become fighting with the man he'd been raised to be. "I need time," he said finally. "Time to think. To plan. Then take time," Elena said. "But don't take too long. Because men like Harrison Cole, they don't wait, they move. And if we're going to protect what we've built here, we need to move faster." That night, Elena lay awake listening to the mountain winds, wondering what came next. Wondering if love, because yes, it was love now, she could admit that, was enough to stand against family empires and legal obligations, wondering if sometimes the brave thing wasn't fighting at all but knowing when to compromise. But compromise, she was about to learn, wasn't in her nature. The week following Harrison Cole's visit felt like living under a storm cloud that refused to break. All tension and no release. James withdrew into himself, spending hours staring at the mountains like they held answers written in stone. Daniel grew quiet again, the scared, uncertain child he'd been when he first arrived. And Elena. Elena felt something she hadn't experienced in 3 years, helplessness. She'd built her life on self-sufficiency, on the bone-deep certainty that if she just worked hard enough, planned carefully enough, she could control her world. But this was beyond her control. This was about money and power and systems designed to crush anyone who dared step outside their designated place. But helplessness had never sat well with Elena Hartwell. On the 8th day after Harrison's visit, she did something she'd sworn she'd never do. She rode down to Preston's Crossing not for supplies, but for information. The saloon was where men gathered to talk, to share news and gossip and everything in between. Elena had never set foot inside. Respectable women didn't. But Elena had stopped caring about respectability around the same time she'd stopped caring about other people's opinions. She pushed through the doors at mid-morning when the place was mostly empty, just a few early drinkers and the bartender cleaning glasses. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. Elena walked straight to the bar. "Whiskey," she said. The bartender, grizzled man named Pete, stared at her like she'd grown a second head. "Miss Hartwell, I'm not asking for your thoughts on what I should think," Elena interrupted coolly. "I'm asking for whiskey." Pete poured, his hands shaking slightly. Elena downed it in one swallow, relishing the burn. "Harrison Cole," she said, loud enough for the room to hear. "The investigator from San Francisco. Where's he staying?" Silence. Then, from the corner, a voice. "Morrison Hotel, room 6. Elena turned. The speaker was an older man she recognized vaguely. Tobias Grant, a rancher who kept to himself. "Why are you telling me?" Elena asked. Tobias shrugged. "Because Cole's been asking questions all week, spreading money around, trying to buy information about you and your guests. Seems to me a woman has a right to know when someone's digging into her business." "Thank you," Elena said, genuinely surprised. "Don't thank me yet," Tobias continued. "Cole's also been talking to Lucas Brennan, Marcus's cousin. You know him?" Elena's blood chilled. She knew Lucas Brennan. Everyone knew Lucas Brennan. He owned half the town and had proposed to Elena 3 times before she moved to the Ridge. Each rejection had made him angrier. "What's Lucas got to do with this?" "Lucas heard you're harboring a rich man from San Francisco. Heard there might be money in it. He's been talking about how you need protection. How a woman alone up there isn't safe. How maybe the law should get involved." The threat was clear. Lucas was positioning himself to either claim Elena through some twisted protection scheme or punish her for rejecting him. Probably both. Elena felt rage wash through her, hot and clarifying. Let him try. She left the saloon and went straight to the Morrison Hotel. Propriety be damned. She knocked on room 6 hard enough to rattle the frame. Harrison Cole opened the door, surprise crossing his face before smoothing into that practiced smile. "Miss Hartwell, to what do I owe?" "How much?" Elena interrupted. "Excuse me? How much is the Worthington family willing to pay to get James back? Because I'm assuming there's a number. There's always a number." Harrison's smile turned genuine, the kind sharks show before they bite. "Why, Miss Hartwell? Are you willing to negotiate?" "I'm willing to understand what I'm dealing with," Elena said coldly. "So name your price." Harrison studied her for a long moment, then gestured for her to enter. Elena hesitated. Going into a man's hotel room was social suicide, but she'd already burned those bridges. She stepped inside. "The Worthington estate is worth approximately $8 million, Harrison said, closing the door. "James's inheritance alone is over $2 million. The family is authorized to pay up to $50,000 for information leading directly to his return. Elena's stomach dropped. $50,000. More money than everyone in Preston's Crossing would see in their combined lifetimes. That kind of money could buy anything. Loyalty, lies, even justice. And if he doesn't return? The estate passes to his uncle, Jeffrey Worthington, who is, shall we say, far less sentimental about family than one might hope. Jeffrey's been waiting for this opportunity for 30 years. He'll contest James's claim in court, drag Daniel through years of legal battles, and ultimately, he'll win. Because Jeffrey has resources, connections, and most importantly, he has time. Elena felt sick. And Daniel? Harrison's expression flickered, the first genuine emotion she'd seen from him. The boy will be fine. Wealthy beyond measure. Educated at the finest schools. He'll want for nothing, except perhaps a father who's present. James is present now, Elena said fiercely. More present than he's ever been. Yes, Harrison agreed quietly. Playing house on a mountain. But Miss Hartwell, how long can that last? How long before winter comes again? Before supplies run low? Before reality intrudes? James wasn't raised for this life, neither was Daniel. Eventually the fantasy breaks. And then what? Elena wanted to argue. Wanted to prove him wrong. But doubt had already planted its seeds. She left without another word, her mind churning. She rode back up the mountain as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. When she reached the cabin, James was waiting outside. He took one look at her face and knew. "You went to see him," he said. Not an accusation, just fact. "I needed to understand." Elena dismounted, her legs unsteady. "Needed to know what we're facing, and now you know." "Now I know it's worse than I thought," Elena admitted. She told him everything. Lucas's threats, Harrison's numbers, Jeffrey's waiting machinations. James listened in silence, his face growing harder with each word. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. "I have to go back," he finally said. "No, Elena, listen to me." James took her hands, his grip almost desperate. "If I don't go back, Jeffrey wins everything. And he'll use that money, that power, to make all our lives miserable. He'll sue you for harboring me. He'll claim Daniel is being neglected. He'll invent charges, file complaints by judges, whatever it takes. He won't stop until he destroys everything we've built." "Then we fight him," Elena insisted. "We get a lawyer." With what money?" James asked gently. "Elena, you're barely surviving up here. I've seen your accounts, your supplies. You're one bad winter away from losing everything. How can we fight a legal battle that could last years?" Elena felt tears burn her eyes, tears of frustration, not sadness. "So that's it? You just go back? Let them win?" "No," James said firmly. "I go back, and I end it. On my terms. What does that mean?" James pulled her close, his chin resting on her head. "It means I claim my inheritance. It means I sit through the lawyers and the paperwork and the society events. It means I play the role they want, just long enough to secure Daniel's future. And then what?" Elena whispered against his chest. "And then I come back, to you, to this place, with enough money to protect all of us, to buy the land around your ridge so no one can threaten you, to set up trusts that ensure Daniel's taken care of without Jeffrey's interference, to build a life that's actually ours." It sounded perfect. It sounded like hope. It sounded like a lie they were both choosing to believe. "How long?" Elena asked. 6 months, James said. "Maybe less. Just long enough to satisfy the legal requirements and establish my claim." 6 months is a lifetime, Elena said, pulling back to look at him. "Things change. People change. You'll be back in that world. The parties, the society, women, the expectations. What if you remember why you loved it? What if this—" She gestured at the cabin, the mountain. "What if this becomes just a memory of a time you played at being someone else?" James cupped her face in his hands. "Elena Hartwell, I have never been more myself than I am here. With you. These past months haven't been playing. They've been waking up. And I'm not giving that up. I'm not giving you up. Promise me," Elena demanded. "Promise me you'll come back." "I promise," James said, and sealed it with a kiss that tasted like goodbye and forever tangled together. But promises, Elena knew, were fragile things, easily broken by the weight of the world. 3 days later, James and Daniel prepared to leave. Harrison Cole had arranged transportation, a coach that would take them to the nearest railroad station. From there, San Francisco. From there, everything James had been running from. Elena helped Daniel pack his few belongings, her heart breaking with every item folded into his small bag. The boy cried, silent tears that tore at her worse than any storm. "I don't want to go," Daniel whispered. "I want to stay with you, Miss Elena." Elena knelt down, taking his small face in her hands. "Listen to me, Daniel. You're going to do amazing things. You're going to learn and grow and become someone incredible. And when you're old enough, when you're strong enough, you come back here. You come home. Understand?" Daniel nodded, throwing his arms around her neck. "I love you, Miss Elena." "I love you too, little one," Elena whispered, letting her tears fall freely now. "So very much." James stood apart, watching them, his own eyes bright with unshed tears. When Daniel finally released her, James pulled Elena aside. "I left something for you," he said quietly. "In the cabin, under the floorboard by the fireplace. Don't look until after we're gone. James, please," he interrupted gently. "Just trust me." The coach arrived just after dawn. Harrison Cole sat up front with the driver, looking satisfied. James and Daniel climbed inside, both turning back for one last look. Elena stood in front of her cabin, their cabin, for a brief, beautiful time, and raised her hand in farewell. She held it there until the coach disappeared down the mountain trail, until even the dust settled. Then, and only then, did she allow herself to collapse. She sat on the cabin steps for hours, staring at nothing, feeling the emptiness pressing in from all sides. The solitude she'd once craved now felt like suffocation. The independence she'd fought for felt like isolation. Finally, as the sun began to set, she went inside. She knelt by the fireplace, finding the loose floorboard James had mentioned. Beneath it was a leather pouch, heavy and substantial. She opened it with shaking hands. Gold coins, hundreds of them. Enough money to last her years. Enough to buy the entire ridge if she wanted. Enough to never worry about survival again. And beneath the coins, a letter. She unfolded it, recognizing James's precise handwriting. "Elena, this money is yours no matter what happens. It's not charity. It's payment for saving our lives, for teaching me what it means to live, for showing Daniel what kindness looks like. But more than that, it's my investment in our future. Use it to secure the land, to build, to protect yourself from anyone who would threaten you. I will come back. I swear on everything I hold sacred. 6 months, maybe less. Wait for me. And if I'm somehow detained longer than expected, don't wait forever. Live your life, be happy. That's all I've ever wanted for you. Yours always, James." Elena read the letter 3 times, then folded it carefully and pressed it to her heart. 6 months. She could wait 6 months. She had to believe she could. But in the back of her mind, a small voice whispered warnings. Whispered that money and power had gravity, that once James re-entered that world, letting go would be harder than he imagined. Whispered that sometimes love wasn't enough. Elena stood, wiping her tears, and looked around her empty cabin. The silence was deafening. The space too large. The mountain too quiet, but she'd survived alone before. She could do it again, even if this time it felt like dying. They say time heals all wounds, but Elena learned that time also deepens them, carving channels through your heart until they become part of your landscape. 2 months passed, then 3, then 4. Elena threw herself into work with a ferocity that bordered on madness. She used James's money to buy the surrounding land, 1,500 acres that ensured no one could threaten her solitude again. She hired workers from town to help rebuild the barn, larger and stronger than before. She bought livestock, good breeding stock that would sustain her for years. She was building an empire of independence, and it felt completely hollow. Letters came at first. James wrote every week, long, detailed accounts of his return to San Francisco, the lawyers and their endless questions, the society events he had to attend, the board meetings where his father's empire was being dissected and redistributed, the fight with Jeffrey, who contested every clause of the inheritance with vicious determination. Daniel wrote too, childish letters filled with misspellings and stories about the grand house and the tutors and the toys. But between the lines, Elena could read his unhappiness, could feel his longing for the mountain, for simplicity, for her. She wrote back, carefully constructed letters that shared news about the ranch, about the livestock, about the mountain's moods. She didn't tell James about the nightmares that woke her gasping. Didn't tell Daniel about the mornings she couldn't get out of bed. Didn't tell either of them that sometimes she stood on the ridge at sunset and screamed her heartbreak into the wind. But then, the letters stopped. First, James missed a week. Then 2, Elena told herself he was busy, told herself lawyers and estates demanded time. Then 3 weeks passed. 4, 5. Elena rode down to Preston's, crossing to check with the postal office, nothing. She sent a letter to the address James had provided in San Francisco. It came back marked return to sender, no longer at this address. Panic set in then, cold and consuming. She considered traveling to San Francisco herself. But winter was coming and she couldn't leave the ranch. Couldn't abandon everything she'd built. Couldn't face the possibility that James had chosen his old life over their future. The whispers in town started around month 5. Rumors carried by travelers from California. Stories about James Worthington Morrison, back in society, attending parties, seen with eligible women from prominent families. Some said he was courting a senator's daughter. Others claimed he was already engaged. Elena told herself they were lies. Told herself small-town gossip magnified everything beyond recognition. But doubt crept in like frost. Slow, persistent, freezing everything it touched. Then, in the 6th month, Lucas Brennan came calling. Elena was in the barn when she heard the horses, 3 riders approaching from the valley trail. She grabbed her rifle instinctively, but relaxed slightly when she recognized Lucas in the lead. Behind him were 2 ranch hands she knew vaguely, hired muscle more than working cowboys. "Elena," Lucas called out, dismounting with practiced ease. "Been meaning to ride up here for weeks." "Lucas," Elena acknowledged coolly, not setting down her rifle. "What do you want?" Lucas smiled, the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. "Just checking on you. Heard you've been buying up land, building quite an operation." "My business is my business," Elena said. "True enough," Lucas agreed, stepping closer despite her obvious unwelcoming stance. "But I worry about you up here alone. It's not safe. Not proper." "I've managed 3 years without your concern," Elena said flatly. "I'll manage another 30. Lucas's smile hardened. "That rich man of yours isn't coming back, Elena. Everyone knows it. He went back to his world and remembered what real life looks like. Can't blame him. Who'd choose this?" He gestured dismissively at the mountain. "Over San Francisco society." Each word landed like a punch, not because they were cruel, but because they echoed Elena's own fears. "Get off my property," she said quietly. "I'm trying to help you," Lucas insisted, his tone shifting to something meant to sound reasonable. "You're alone, vulnerable. You've got property now, money. You need protection. I don't need anything from you," Elena interrupted. "I need you to leave now." Lucas's face darkened. "You think you're better than everyone? Think you can live up here alone? Refuse every decent proposal, pine after some rich bastard who used you for entertainment during a storm? But here's reality, Elena. He's gone. He's not coming back. And when winter comes, you'll remember why you need people like me." "People like you," Elena said coldly, "are exactly why I choose to live alone. Now for the last time, get off my land." For a moment, Lucas looked like he might argue, might push further. His hands twitched toward his gun and Elena's grip tightened on her rifle. But then Tobias Grant appeared, riding up from the lower pasture where he'd been helping with fence work. The older rancher took in the scene with shrewd eyes and positioned his horse deliberately between Elena and Lucas. "Problem here, Miss Hartwell?" Tobias asked mildly. Elena felt gratitude wash through her. "Mr. Brennan was just leaving." Lucas glared at both of them, but 3 against 1 made the odds unfavorable. "This isn't over," he said, mounting his horse. "You can't hide up here forever, Elena. Eventually you'll need help. And when you do, don't come begging." He rode off with his men, leaving dust and threats hanging in the air. "Thank you," Elena said to Tobias once they were gone. The older man shrugged. "Lucas has always been a snake. You need help up here, Miss Hartwell, you ask. Some of us still believe in being decent neighbors. After Tobias left, Elena sat on her cabin steps and let herself acknowledge what she'd been avoiding for weeks. James wasn't coming back. 6 months had passed. More than 6 months. And she'd heard nothing. No letters. No telegrams. No word through mutual acquaintances, just silence. Either he couldn't come back, trapped by legal complications or family obligations. Or worse, he'd chosen not to. Chosen the comfort of his old life over the uncertainty of their new one. Either way, the result was the same. She was alone. Elena looked at her ranch, the expanded barn, the new fences, the healthy livestock. She'd built exactly what she'd set out to build. Independence, security, survival. But survival wasn't living. And security meant nothing when you had no one to share it with. That night, Elena made a decision. She would wait 1 more month until the first snow. If James hadn't returned by then, she would accept reality. Would let go of hope. Would figure out how to live with a heart broken clean in half. 1 month, 30 more days of hoping after that. She'd learn to stop. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. Because 3 weeks later, on a morning when frost painted the world silver, a rider appeared on the ridge trail. Not James. Not Daniel. But Harrison Cole returned. Elena's stomach dropped as she watched him approach. Harrison's presence meant news, and given the silence, Elena doubted it was good news. Miss Hartwell. Harrison dismounted, his usual smug expression replaced by something that might have been discomfort. I apologize for the intrusion. Where's James? Elena demanded, not bothering with pleasantries. Harrison hesitated. Actually hesitated, and Elena's world tilted. That's complicated, Harrison said carefully. Perhaps we should speak inside. Tell me now, Elena said, her voice deadly quiet. Is he alive? Yes, Harrison said quickly. Yes, he's alive. But there have been complications. Elena forced herself to breathe. What kind of complications? Jeffrey Worthington contested the inheritance more aggressively than anticipated. He produced documents claiming James abandoned his responsibilities and was therefore unfit to inherit. The case went to court. It's been messy, and James won, Harrison said. Barely, but he won. The inheritance is his. Daniel is secure. Then why hasn't he come back? Elena's voice cracked despite her efforts to remain strong. Harrison looked genuinely uncomfortable now. Because Jeffrey didn't give up. He's launched a secondary lawsuit claiming James is an unfit father, that his flight to the mountains, his association with you, proves instability. He's trying to gain custody of Daniel. Elena felt rage flood through her. That's insane. It's strategic, Harrison corrected. And it's working. The court appointed an evaluator, someone to assess James's fitness as a parent, and that evaluator recommended that James establish stable residency in San Francisco, demonstrate commitment to Daniel's education and social development, prove that his time on the mountain was an aberration, not a pattern. So he's trapped, Elena whispered. He's fighting, Harrison said. But yes, essentially, he's trapped. At least for now. The custody case could take another year. Maybe more, a year. Another year of waiting. Another year of hope deferred. Why didn't he write? Elena asked. Why the silence? Harrison looked away. Jeffrey's lawyers are watching everything. Every letter, every telegram, every visitor. They're building a case that James is distracted by an inappropriate relationship, that he's prioritizing his own desires over Daniel's needs. James stopped writing to protect you, to keep you from becoming evidence in Jeffrey's case. Elena sank onto her cabin steps, the weight of it crushing her. So what now? Now, Harrison said carefully. James asked me to come here. To explain, and to give you this. He handed her an envelope. Elena recognized James's handwriting immediately. Her hand shook as she opened it. Elena, if you're reading this, then Harrison has told you everything, and you understand why I can't come back yet. Why I haven't written. Why every day away from you feels like dying slowly. I'm fighting. For Daniel. For our future. For the right to choose my own life. But Jeffrey is relentless and the courts move slowly. I need time. More time than I promised. I understand if you can't wait. Understand if you need to move forward with your life. You deserve happiness, Elena. You deserve more than uncertainty and empty promises, but if you can wait just a little longer, if you can hold on, I swear I will come back to you. I swear on Daniel's life, on everything I am, that I will find a way. Wait for me. Please. Yours always. James. Elena read the letter twice, tears streaming down her face. Then she looked up at Harrison. Tell him, she started, then stopped, gathering her strength. Tell him I'll wait. Tell him I'll wait as long as it takes. But tell him something else too. What? Tell him that if he doesn't fight with everything he has, if he lets Jeffrey win even 1 inch, I'll ride to San Francisco myself and drag him back here by his collar. Harrison smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. I'll tell him exactly that. After Harrison left, Elena sat alone on her ridge, watching the sun set over mountains that had been her sanctuary and her prison. Another year. Maybe more. Could she survive another year of this? She thought about James, about Daniel, about the life they'd built together in those brief, perfect weeks. She thought about love, how it demanded more than passion, more than desire, how it demanded patience, sacrifice, faith in things unseen. And she made her choice. She would wait. She would survive. She would build her ranch into something extraordinary, and when James finally came home, she would be ready, because some things, some people, were worth waiting for. Even if the waiting broke you, even if the winter lasted years. 15 months, 467 days, 11,208 hours. Not that Elena was counting. The second winter had been harder than the first, not because of the weather, but because of the silence. Because hope, when stretched too thin, becomes transparent as ice, beautiful but brittle, capable of shattering at the slightest pressure. But Elena Hartwell had never been good at breaking. She'd turned her ranch into the most successful operation within 100 miles. Her livestock bred true and healthy. Her land produced more than she needed. She'd hired 3 ranch hands, good men who respected her authority and never once questioned why a woman ran the operation alone. The town had slowly changed its opinion of her. What they'd once called madness, they now called determination. What they'd labeled recklessness, they now respected as strength. Marcus Brennan no longer gossiped about her. He was too busy trying to get her business. Lucas had stopped coming around after she'd publicly humiliated him at a town meeting about water rights. Elena Hartwell had become formidable, and utterly, desperately lonely. Letters came sporadically now. James wrote when he could, brief updates carefully worded to avoid giving Jeffrey's lawyers ammunition. The custody case dragged on, tangled in legal complications that seemed designed to last forever. Daniel wrote less frequently, his letters shorter, more formal, like he was forgetting how to be a child and learning how to be a Worthington instead. Elena tried not to think about what that meant. Tried not to calculate how much of Daniel would be left by the time this ended. Tried not to wonder if James's fight was costing them the very thing he was fighting for. But trying not to think about something doesn't make it stop being true. Spring came late that year, reluctant, as if the mountain itself was tired of beginnings. Elena stood on her ridge one April morning, watching snow melt into streams, and felt something shift inside her. She was 31 years old. She'd built an empire. She'd proven everyone wrong. She'd survived storms and threats and heartbreak, but she was so tired of surviving. That afternoon, she rode down to Preston's Crossing, not for supplies, but for the telegraph office. She'd avoided sending messages, respecting James's caution about Jeffrey's surveillance. But 15 months was enough. 15 months of silence and patience and faith was enough. She wrote out her message carefully. James Worthington, Morrison, San Francisco. Waited long enough. Need answer. Are you coming home? Yes or no? Elena. She paid the operator, then sat on the bench outside to wait. Telegraph responses usually took hours, sometimes days. She'd brought a book, prepared to stay as long as necessary. The response came in 45 minutes. The operator emerged, his face carefully neutral as he handed her the paper. Elena's hands shook as she unfolded it. Elena Hartwell. Preston's Crossing, yes, coming home, case concluded. Daniel and I leave tomorrow. Forgive delay, always yours, James. Elena read it 3 times, her vision blurring with tears. Then she stood, folded the telegram carefully into her pocket, and walked to the general store. Marcus Brennan looked up as she entered. Miss Hartwell, what can I... I need supplies, Elena interrupted, her voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm her.
Enough for 3 people.
Good quality. Price is no object. Marcus's eyebrows rose. 3 people? That's what I said, Elena confirmed, already moving through the store, selecting items. And I need fresh produce delivered to my ranch. Tomorrow, if possible. She spent 2 hours in town, purchasing everything she needed, and several things she didn't need but wanted anyway. Coffee, real sugar, books for Daniel, clothes that would fit a boy who'd been growing for 15 months, small luxuries that had no place in survival, but every place in homecoming. By the time she returned to her ranch, the sun was setting. Elena stood in her cabin, larger now with a second room she'd built over the winter, and saw it through fresh eyes. It wasn't much. Rough-hewn furniture, simple decorations, the bare necessities of mountain living, but it was home. It had always been home. And soon it would be complete. The next 3 days were agony. Elena cleaned everything twice. Cooked meals she was too nervous to eat. Checked the ridge trail so many times her ranch hands started exchanging concerned glances. On the 4th day, Tobias rode up with news. Saw a coach heading up the mountain trail. Fancy one, San Francisco fancy. Elena's heart stopped, then started beating triple time. When? About an hour ago, Tobias said. Figured you'd want to know. Elena thanked him with words she immediately forgot. Then ran to the ridge overlook where she could see the trail. And there, winding up the mountain path, a coach drawn by 4 horses. Even from this distance, she could see it was expensive. Could imagine James inside, nervous, exhausted, hoping she'd kept her promise. She watched until the coach reached the final bend, until it was close enough that she could see the driver's face. Then she couldn't wait anymore. Elena ran down the trail, her practical ranch clothes hiked up, her hair coming loose from its braid, all dignity abandoned. She didn't care. Dignity meant nothing. Appearances meant nothing. Only this moment mattered. The coach stopped. The door opened. And James stepped out, older, thinner, wearing expensive clothes that looked foreign on him now. His beard was gone, his hair cut short and civilized. He looked every inch the San Francisco millionaire, except for his eyes. His eyes were still the same, storm gray and full of everything words couldn't hold. Elena, he breathed. And it sounded like prayer and apology and homecoming all at once. She reached him in seconds, and he caught her, lifting her off the ground. His face buried in her neck. She felt him shaking, or maybe that was her. Maybe it was both of them, trembling with relief and joy and the simple miracle of being together again. You came back, Elena whispered against his shoulder. I promised, James said. I always promised. They stood like that for long minutes, neither willing to let go, both trying to convince themselves this was real. Then a small voice. Miss Elena? Elena pulled back, looking down. Daniel stood beside the coach, taller now, his face more mature but still bearing traces of the boy she remembered. He wore a suit that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe, but his expression was pure uncertainty. Daniel? Elena knelt down, opening her arms. Come here, sweet boy. Daniel hesitated only a second before running to her, throwing his arms around her neck with desperate strength. I missed you so much, he said, his voice cracking. So much. I missed you too, Elena said, holding him tight. Every single day. James watched them, his eyes bright with unshed tears. When Elena looked up, she saw in his face what the last 15 months had cost him. The weight he'd carried, the battles he'd fought, the price of choosing love over obligation. Come on, Elena said, standing but keeping one hand in Daniel's. Let's go home. They walked back to the cabin together, James and Elena side by side, Daniel between them holding both their hands. The coach followed slowly, the driver clearly uncertain about the rough mountain terrain. When they reached the cabin, Elena watched James's face as he took in the changes. The expanded structure, the new barn, the fenced pastures full of livestock. You built all this, he said, wonder in his voice. I had time, Elena said wryly, and motivation. That evening, after Daniel had been fed and put to bed in the new room Elena had prepared, James and Elena finally had time alone. They sat by the fire, their usual spots as if no time had passed, and the silence was both comfortable and heavy with things unsaid. Tell me, Elena said finally. Tell me everything, so James told her. About the custody battle that had consumed his life, about Jeffrey's relentless attacks, his manipulation of the courts, his determination to control the Worthington legacy, even if it meant destroying James in the process, about the lawyers and evaluators and endless scrutiny, about the compromise James had finally negotiated. He kept custody of Daniel and control of his inheritance, but only if he agreed to maintain a residence in San Francisco and ensure Daniel received proper education. But I found a loophole, James said, a smile crossing his tired face. The agreement says I must maintain a residence. It doesn't say I have to live there year-round, 3 months a year. That's all they can legally require. The rest of the time, I'm free. 3 months, Elena repeated, testing the words. We can manage 3 months. There's more, James continued. I used some of the inheritance to establish a trust for Daniel. Enough money to ensure he's educated, taken care of, secure, no matter what happens. Jeffrey can't touch it, can't contest it. It's done. And the rest? Elena asked. James looked at her directly. The rest I want to invest here. In this ranch. In building something real. If... He hesitated. If you'll have me. Have us. I know 15 months is a long time. I know you might have... Elena kissed him before he could finish the sentence. Kissed him with all the longing and patience and faith of the last 15 months. When she pulled back, they were both breathless. Yes, she said simply. Yes to all of it. James pulled a small box from his pocket, velvet worn from carrying. He opened it to reveal a ring. Simple gold with a single stone that caught the firelight. I bought this 14 months ago, he said quietly. Carried it every day, hoping, believing I'd get the chance to give it to you properly. He slipped off the couch, kneeling before her. Elena Hartwell, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that you are worth waiting for? Elena felt tears stream down her face. Happy tears this time. Only if you let me prove the same thing. Is that a yes? That's a yes. The ring slid onto her finger perfectly, like it had always belonged there. They were married 3 weeks later in a ceremony so small it was almost private. Tobias stood as witness. Daniel beamed throughout, his happiness transforming him back into the child he'd been. Elena wore a simple dress she'd stitched herself. James wore ranch clothes that finally looked natural on him. The preacher from Preston's Crossing kept it brief, sensing this wasn't about spectacle but about making promises that had already been kept. When he pronounced them husband and wife, the sun broke through clouds that had been threatening rain all morning. Daniel whooped with joy. Tobias clapped. And Elena and James kissed like two people who'd found their way home after being lost for years. The months that followed weren't perfect. Life never is. They struggled to merge their lives, to navigate the reality of being a family after so much time apart. Daniel had nightmares about being taken away again. James occasionally woke in a panic, convinced Jeffrey had found a new legal loophole. Elena sometimes needed space, her years of solitude making constant companionship overwhelming. But they worked through it. Together. James proved as capable a rancher as he'd promised. His business acumen translating surprisingly well to livestock management and land development. They expanded the operation, hired more workers, became legitimate competition for the larger ranches in the territory. Elena discovered that partnership didn't mean losing independence. It meant having someone to share the burden with. Someone who saw her strength and loved her for it rather than despite it. Daniel thrived. He spent summers on the mountain, learning to ride and work and survive. Winters in San Francisco gave him education and polish. But it was clear to everyone which life he loved more. The mountain had claimed him just as it had claimed them all. 3 years after James returned, on a spring morning that felt like new beginnings, Elena stood on her ridge watching Daniel teach a new ranch hand how to mend fence. James came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. Happy? He asked. Elena leaned back against him, surveying everything they'd built. The ranch sprawling across the ridge, the cabin that had grown into a proper house, the life they'd carved from rock and hope and sheer determination. Yes, she said simply. Yes, I'm happy. No regrets? She turned in his arms, looking up at him. Only one. James's face fell. What? That storm didn't come sooner, Elena said with a smile. That we wasted years being who we thought we should be instead of who we were. James laughed, kissing her forehead. Then we won't waste any more time. No, Elena agreed. We won't. That evening, the three of them sat on the porch watching the sun set over mountains that had witnessed their story from the beginning. Daniel fell asleep between them, his head on Elena's lap, his hand in James's. You know what I think? James said quietly, careful not to wake his son. What? I think that storm was fate. I think we were meant to find each other. Meant to build this life. Elena considered it. Maybe, or maybe we just got lucky. Wandered into each other's lives and decided to stay. Either way, James said, squeezing her hand, I'd do it all again. Every struggle, every challenge, every moment of doubt. All of it was worth it to end up here. Here, Elena repeated, looking at her family, her home, her life. Yes, here is perfect. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the world in shades of gold and promise, Elena Hartwell Morrison finally understood what she'd been searching for all along. Not survival. Not independence. Not even safety, but home, real home. The kind built from love and sacrifice and choosing each other every single day. The kind that weathers storms and silence and separation and comes through stronger on the other side. The kind worth waiting for. Years later, when people asked Elena about her life, about how a woman alone on a mountain ended up with a family and a fortune, she always told them the same thing. A storm brought them to my door, she'd say. But love made them stay, and if they pressed for details, asked about the hardships and the waiting and the pain of separation, she'd simply smile and look toward the mountains. Every story worth telling, she'd say, has winter in it. The question isn't whether you'll face the cold, but whether you'll survive it together. James would always add his own conclusion, and whether you'll choose each other when the thaw finally comes. Daniel, grown now into a man who split his time between San Francisco business and mountain ranching, had his own version. They taught me that home isn't a place, he'd say. It's people. It's choosing to stay even when leaving would be easier. It's building something strong enough to weather any storm. And perhaps that's the truest version of their story. Not a tale of rescue or redemption, though it was both. Not a story of wealth finding poverty or city meeting wilderness, though those elements existed, but simply a story of three people who found each other in the midst of a storm and decided that together was better than apart. That family was worth fighting for. That love, real love, the kind that survives separation and doubt and time itself, was the most valuable thing any of them would ever possess. The mountain still stands, of course. Mountains always do. The cabin is larger now, weathered by years but solid as ever. The ranch thrives under the care of the next generation. And sometimes, on winter evenings when snow falls soft and silent, you can still see lamplight in the windows. Can still imagine three people sitting by a fire, grateful for shelter and warmth and the simple miracle of being together. Because some stories don't end. They just become part of the landscape. Part of the mountain itself. Part of the legacy passed down through generations about what it means to be brave enough to love, patient enough to wait, and strong enough to choose each other again and again and again. That's the story of the Ridge. The story of Elena and James and Daniel. The story of a storm that changed everything, and the family that built their home in its wake. And if you listen closely on quiet nights, the mountain still remembers, still holds those memories in its stones and trees and wind, still whispers the truth that love, when it's real, becomes eternal. If you felt that story deep in your heart, go ahead and hit that like button. It helps this channel grow and brings more tales like this to life. Comment below and tell us where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel, and before you go, check out these other powerful stories waiting just for you right here on the screen. Until next time, keep your fire burning and never stop believing in second chances.